Welcome to The Point of View. It's your favorite current affairs show on Ghana television. On The Point of View, we get the right guests. We ask them relevant questions on issues that matter to you. And of course, an interactive show. If you're watching on television, please feel free to send us your comments on the WhatsApp number on the screen. And if you're watching any of the social media platforms, get in touch and let's talk. I have a big show for you today because it's the show after the big budget. This is actually a midterm budget, probably the longest midterm budget I've had. Certainly the longest time I've seen a man talk in a mask. Finance Minister Ken Ofori-Atta is going to speak to us on his plan, not just for the next 6 months, but possibly for the next 3.5 years. He's my guest on the show. We'll be right back. Thank you for joining us again. Honorable Ken Ofori-Atta, thank you for joining us on The Point of View on CTTV.
Bernard, it's great to be here. It's been a long 36 hours,
yes.
But really, I hope this will be a comfortable and calming experience.
From the little I know about budgets, I know you take at least a week. Sometimes you go away, sometimes you come together. But in social distancing, how did you do that? So how did you get the team to work on this one?
There were a lot of Zoom meetings, people working from their various spots, and then just the appropriate people meeting. So that was interesting. But I think we saved some money because we didn't have to be, sequestered somewhere. People were in their homes. So that seems to be the beauty of this, how to be able to work efficiently, and still have some home life with it as you're doing it.
For a midterm, I followed budgets for decades. For a midterm, this was one of the longest.
Yeah, and I think it deserved to be because, technically for this governance period, this really will be kind of the last statement dealing with the fiscals. In November, we'll do expenditures, in lieu of appropriation, advance of appropriation for next year. So I think we needed to sort of get the record straight, understand what COVID, which is really unprecedented, has done to us as a nation, and pick people's spirits up and know that there's a great future ahead. So I think it was needed for that.
The word unprecedented is usually bandied around by politicians.
Yeah.
But how unprecedented is this time?
Well, I think they talk about since 1870, we haven't seen such a drastic non-war event before. And then you look at the Spanish flu in 1918, you look at the Great Depression in 1933, then you come back to maybe modern era and look at the financial crisis 2008, 2009. And when you see a contraction of this nature in which the OECD and G20 countries are literally pumping over $11 trillion, throwing all classical economics aside and saying the key issue, A, is a health issue, but that can be taken care of, but it has a grinding effect on the economy, which is what we're experiencing. Ghana, for example, will move from 6.8% growth to 0.9. That's a dramatic 6% reduction. And in Africa, I think most African countries are going to have a negative growth rate for this year. And that's unprecedented for us the past 25 years and, in a period in which there's been 2 decades of relative, stability and economic growth. So it is jarring. So that's the reason for unprecedented.
And one of the interesting things we realized in the period was the article you wrote to the FT where you asked the question what an African finance minister does. So whereas your colleagues in Europe are sharing trillions of dollars as a kitty,
right?
Here we're not too sure if
we don't have that.
You're even talking to anybody. I mean, the president is in Mali to solve some.
He's back.
The contrast. So whereas Europe is thinking about money, somebody says don't give free money. They should pay for it, the frugal for and all of that. Our people are thinking about quenching a fire in Mali. There isn't even some pool of money that Africa is going to say, let's share. I mean, how stark is the difference in fortunes between us here and the Western world and OECD?
Yeah. But now there's even more grave or more saddening, or there's a lot more inequity when you realize that even in this period, Africa loses tourism, it loses remittances, investors take their money out, and commodity prices also go. And all of those inure to the benefit of the West, or wherever the pandemic came from. So not only are we hit economically, but we are actually in a perverse, twisted way transferring money to them even at this time. And then we are also saddled with Africa's debt, which I think this year is going to be about $44 billion of servicing of loans, etc. So it's not easy, and then we don't have a reserve currency, and so you have to also manage your currency, and it's quite remarkable because I think year to date it's about 2.3, 2.4%, the dollar depreciation, which really is quite a miracle, given the pressures that we have.
Honorable Minister, there's a feeling that we are too docile as a continent in letting this unfair system go on. For example, in the Western world, they have bonds, they have interest rate policies. Some are doing sub-zero interest rate. Some are thinking of printing money. That's almost an anathema here. I mean, the kinds of things...
They are printing.
Yes, the kinds of things developed countries are allowed to do without punishment. South Africa has gotten downgraded a few months ago.
That's correct.
I mean, why are you so polite? Why aren't African finance ministers saying, guys, this is not going to work. We won't pay our debt. Why are we so... I don't know. It's almost like we are afraid to say this is not right.
Yeah. No, I mean, Bernard, if you have seen... at least since this call, we've always talked. I think we had an Africa caucus meeting last year in which the decisions to really tackle the global financial architecture was brought to bear. I mean, I think this COVID period has really thrown even more light on the injustice in the system. And a number of us finance ministers, including a UN ECA and some AU envoys that have been selected, are working through a whole program to look at the distribution of special drawing rights, issuing new ones, bundling those that are not used, looking at creating a vehicle that will facilitate entry at a cheaper rate into the capital markets, and also the vexed question of debt relief and cancellation. We've gone quite a bit of ways in that, and I suspect that by the annual meetings we may see some rather, as you say, tectonic shifts.
So for now, we have to make do with deferring our debt payments till end of the year. That's just 4 months away.
Around the corner. That's what the G20 said last Saturday. There was a G20 meeting in which I think there's a consensus that this should move to the end of 2021.
Will this include debts to China?
China has still not made clear where it stands in that, and so there has to be an engagement of China on that one.
How much of your time do you spend between thinking about Ghana's problems and working with other African countries to solve the structural inequities we've just described?
Yeah. I mean, certainly, home is home, but that sort of Damocles, you may want to call it, is important. And so I think this period, it may be inching through 15%, it might go up to 20% to do that, and also partly because I chair the Development Committee of the World Bank. I think I need to ratchet it up to make some real structural shifts in this whole thing. I mean, Bernard, if you look at maybe an average of 8% is what we go to the market for, and we are paying about $44 billion for the whole continent. Imagine getting an upgrade or an enhancement which brings you to 2%. That would literally mean that you'll be paying about 15, 16 billion, and 30 billion will be saved on an annual basis. And you ask yourself, what is this African premium all about? When we actually, those who have gone to the capital markets, have not defaulted in 20 years. So those are the fundamental questions that are going to engage us to show that this should be different. And we do have an example in Africa Development Bank where, because of the non-regional wraparound, they're able to go to market for 0.75% for a 3-year paper, and then they lend it to us who are supposedly bad credit. So if we can also get an enhancement through a certain vehicle, then that should work. So I think it's important we spend time on that.
Okay.
And we should
I'm sure we'll talk about that at a different forum. Let's come back home. As I said, 2 hours, 15 minutes. The speech itself is 44 pages. The document itself, very large. What is the most important thing you are telling Ghanaians? Because it's very difficult to follow, especially when you're talking through a mask in Parliament. There wasn't the usual heckling. Mm-hmm. But what's your top two or top 3 key points you're trying to make in this budget?
I wonder why there was a little heckling. I guess everybody realized the enormity of the situation.
Social distance. Some were watching on television for their offices.
I think maybe the president captures it best, which is Ghanaian lives, should be saved at all costs. So that is what we're trying to communicate, and that we are going to do. Secondly, we should pivot off of this crisis into a revitalization and a transformation of our country, and that was that. And third, also to give people a sense of a government that really has spent time with what you call the preferential option for the poor, to ensure that everybody in Ghana has been impacted by the policies that he has effected.
But I didn't get the clarity I got reading your FT article in the budget, because let me quote you. You said a U-shaped recovery is touted, but ours will be likely a steep drop, then a 2 to 3 year downward slide before a recovery, a trapezoid-shaped recovery.
Yeah.
You then go on to then talk about this is not a blizzard. It could be a long winter or even an ice age.
This is not a passing frigate.
Exactly. You're telling the world that we're going to be in this for a long time.
Yeah.
But listening to you on Thursday, I got a different message. It's like, we can do it. We are the MPP. We are better than NDC. We're going to give you free water, free this, free that. I got the impression it's like, look, we will do it. So am I getting something wrong, or is it different messages for different audiences?
No, I don't think so. I think the numbers, we can talk about the numbers all you want, but there's something in a nation called spirit. And spirit, as Kennedy came and say, we're going to go to the moon. Like, yeah, right. How are we going to go to the moon in the 60s with all of these problems that they had? And the question really for us is, if you juxtapose 2017 January to where we are and actually take stock of what we have done, I think that was a really terrible period. Okay? But we've been able to get some 1.2 million people in school. We've been able to do school feeding program for 3 million people. We've been able to keep the lights on. So those all seemed impossible, and we did. And so then we are struck with this pandemic. And you can, turn over and die. But amazingly, this year, we went to the market in February. Now, I don't know why, but we did. The earliest we've ever gone, maybe 2-3 months ahead of time. And as soon as we finished, the gates just closed and COVID came. So we were cushioned immediately, okay? And then you ask yourself, how is that possible? Then we were able to go to the IMF for the rapid credit facility, $1 billion, without any conditions. How did that occur? And then we started this whole issue of how do we get these PPs even done locally? And you got textile and pharmaceuticals working. So, my sense is that in as long as you keep thinking, you are hopeful, you are confident something will happen. But you should not necessarily shield people from the facts. But as to what leadership, proposes to do, I think you need to give confidence about that. And that the question then is, how do you effect burden sharing and sacrifice across the country? Because once the social contract between the people and the republic is good and trustworthy, then their energies will also be galvanized for that.
But don't you risk a false sense of security where, and I have nothing against social interventions, but if you are going to be in a difficulty for 3 years, should people not be made to start getting a sense of what that means in terms of there can't be freebies, we have to be more responsible, we have to work harder. But President gave us March to June, free water, electricity. We've extended that for the Lifeline people. We're making some monies available for different groups. And the tone is we're building 111 hospitals. We're going to do a lot of things. Some people feel it's the election that's driving that and not the economic reality.
I'm not sure. I mean, there are two things that you need as given the mandate. First of all, you can't be complaining about the problems because the problems have kind. You have voted in to do that. Secondly, you cannot kill the spirit of people because that is so fundamental. And you know that your Ghanaians are innovative, ingenious, and can do it. So what is my responsibility? My responsibility is to find ways in which I can cushion this. There's some really sort of raw poverty going on in a land in which 90% of us somehow work in the informal sector, in which I can't even find you because we are not digitalized enough, okay? So I need to intervene. I need to save lives, okay? And that builds trust and then get everybody, in the same boat to move forward. But truly, Bernard, the issue of lives, the dignity of the person and livelihoods, I think trumps a lot of things. But in that vein, when you see the 600 million that we have given to the Cap Bus program, in there is an acknowledgement that give money for people to work, and they have to work. You and I know that wages are not decent in this land. So when you are hit with this load, you have to do something extraordinary. And everybody in the world, Bernard, is doing something extraordinary. America is actually sending checks to people. I mean, can you imagine that? A capitalist society. And then with our level of per capita income and Gini coefficient, to even think that you are not going to do that, I think it's heresy, But the issue, and part of the issue of the 100 billion Obaatanpa program is also people envision that there's work ahead that we have to do, but we have to live before we get there.
This is the point of view. We're having a chat with the Minister of Finance, Ken Ofori-Atta. He presented his midterm budget estimates to Parliament on Thursday, and is asking for in excess of 11 billion Ghana cedis to see us through what he calls the stabilization period. He says we should vote for the MPP again so they can revitalize post-2020. When we come back, we'll ask a few questions around what the NDC thinks about his plan, because Finance Minister in the past, Setekwe, is having none of that. We also have other questions around people who say we've not been treated fairly, we need our monies paid. This is the point of view, don't go away. Welcome back to The Point of View. Today we're talking to Minister of Finance Ken Ofori-Atta. He presented a midterm budget like none other to Parliament. This is the first post-COVID midterm, a crisis that has global implications. Everything is down, but he says he can't bring Ghanaian spirit down. I spoke to your predecessor on this same show a couple of days ago.
How is he?
He's fine. He sympathizes with the crisis in terms of its enormity, but he points out to me that every government has had shocks. But his first issue is that
every government, he recognizes that this is unprecedented.
No, he says
he doesn't.
He does. He does. To be fair, he says there's nothing like COVID.
Oh, great.
But he has two issues with you. He says, number one, the economy he left you wasn't as bad as you say. And he gave me a couple of examples. He says, when you say this is the first time we've had 3 years of a positive primary balance, that's not correct, because in 2015 his primary balance was positive. Number two, you and some of the MP people keep saying his deficit he left was about 9%. But in your debt report, you've acknowledged that it was 6.8 deficit, which if you look at it in a linear series, isn't as terrible as it's being made to sound. What's your comment on that?
I don't know. I mean, Bernard, I really don't like talking politics. And truly, first we have to acknowledge that this is completely unprecedented. We've never seen a period where $11 trillion is being, so that's one. So it's hard to compare. Primary balance 2015, we're talking about 3 continuous years of positive primary balance. So maybe that's the issue. I mean, I can't say much more than what we all inherited. And there must have been a reason why Ghanaians decided they need a new management. So let's just accept that and then see how over the period we've been able to exit the program. And the numbers, if that's what he wants to use, have been really, relatively much better than they had. But the impact in terms of when you look at the social impact of how many people have been to school, the stability of electricity, how many people are in the LEAP program, how many school feeding, which is what, you can say every Ghanaian has participated. If I look at transactions in, let's say, the energy industry, which has brought us those woes, those are maybe a few people getting deals, okay, that were done. So you are seeing a regime where every household is impacted one way or the other because of these flagship programs that the president has. You can also see, sort of on the technical side, the ratings that have come, of how we have managed the country. So, there's a chance in December.
I get the fact that you don't want to argue over numbers, but it's important that since he made reference to specific numbers, I will ask you a couple of questions around that. For example, he says your budget deficit from 2017 to 2018, you made the impact of the energy resolution and the bank resolution a footnote, and that if you adjust the deficit for those 2 items, the figure isn't that much different. So like 2018, your deficit will be close to 7%.
Yeah.
So that the story hadn't changed that much even pre-COVID.
Yeah.
Okay, and he shows us both GOG and IMF data to show that if you decide not to take out those 2, and his point is that in his time he has single spine. He didn't take it out of his deficit. So why are you taking your bank crisis resolution and energy out of the deficit? It gives a false picture.
I'm not sure. I mean, that is correct, because if you look at the appendices and all of that, you can actually see, where it's not hidden, and what am I taking out? A bank crisis which they caused. What am I taking out? An energy crisis which they caused. I think we need to move from that type of minutiae into what are we going to do for Ghanaians and what have we done for them. Getting into these numbers, the person, my cousin in Chebi, is more interested in their kid going to school, in the lights being on. Let's talk about those. Let's see what those numbers are. How is that impacting the Ghanaian? There's a story of Roosevelt when he died, and the cortege was moving upstate New York, and some African-American sharecropper was crying. And the journalist asked him, why? Did you know him? And he said, no, but he knew me. Now that is profound. And Akufo-Addo wants everyone in this country to know him by coming into your home, giving you education, making sure there is food planting for food and jobs, making sure there is light. For me, sitting here, that is my preoccupation.
I understand that. 2 issues there. Yes, the Ghanaian is interested in how they feel, but there's a concern about debt. Again, he showed me a graph where the level of our debt from 2017 started going up. Of course, we rebased the economy, so debt to GDP wasn't that bad. But if you look at our debt figures in the past 3 years and the raw amount of debt, I'm sure ordinary Ghanaians are concerned about that as well, that our debt levels are rising quite seriously.
And you should be concerned. The question is whether you generate the productivity to be able to do that. Now, when you get into a situation where the barrel is empty and your revenue to GDP is about 11 or 12% through years of not managing that, you need to crank up something. Do I have faith? When I started my business, I borrowed $25,000. It was way above my net income or whatever it was you had. 30 years later, you have a data bank institution. Do I have faith that will turn that into real equity? I do. And I believe we can. And so
when the IMF says we are at risk of high debt distress, what do you say to that?
It is that I'm investing in my people more than anybody has ever done, and I believe that is just incalculable what the human spirit can do. I'm clear on that.
You are not endangering and jeopardizing our future by putting us in debt that we can't pay. We already spoke about debt.
How do I jeopardize your future? That the element, which is the human being that is supposed to generate productivity, is better skilled and more confident about himself to do what he ought to do. I don't buy that. I think we need to trust in our ingenuity, in our ability, if we educate our people well, and to build that confidence that is the black star. I don't know. I mean... you've shown us the size of the money you need. So revenue, we didn't get what we wanted, but we had to spend more. So there's a huge gap. Yes,
right?
we had...
revenue shortfall 13 billion.
13 billion.
And then expenditure overspent about 11.
About 11.
So about 26.
Yeah.
Now let's talk about the revenue side.
Yeah.
A couple of things struck me.
Yeah.
You said that among the reasons for our revenue shortfall was that a lot of our consumption taxes didn't do well. The VAT, the petroleum tax, they didn't do very well. Although we did very well in the income tax. Now, talk to me about why the tax, we have such a huge shortfall. Because within that same sentence, you commended the GRA for surpassing their target. What is going on there?
So you had about maybe 5 billion in terms of oil revenue. I think we had projected $63 or so, and now we are looking at $37. So you can see a 5 billion cut. Then when you come to sort of all of GRA, other things, that may be another 5 billion. Then you look at non-tax, which will be dividends and IGFs and remittances and all of that, makes up the balance. So that makes up your 13 that you are talking about.
There was a silence on a type of tax that I've asked you about before, property tax.
Yes.
It's been 3 years, 6 months since you took over. Can you tell us how much you've raised from property tax?
It's completely negligible. I mean, I think we are still going through the law as to valuation of each property and how to, but maybe we are in a good trajectory where we should be able to do that. Now, all of that, Bernard, gives you a sense of our capacity to raise more local revenue. And that is why you can't go on pretending you will never get it, and therefore don't make the investment that you have.
But isn't 3.5 years rather long
in dealing with? We're talking about 60 years.
Yeah, but I'm giving you see, because your sources of growth based on your own budget, 2 areas, ICT and then real estate. So real estate is doing well. Now, because of your higher expenditure, lower revenue, some of your taxes can't help you because people are not working. So consumption taxes will not be that high. Income tax will not be that high. But real estate is growing. Some people feel there's a reluctance to deal with it because it's a tax that affects wealthy people. And you don't want to touch that group. That's why it's been so difficult, not just for you, but for all governments, in actually nailing property tax.
That's kind of cynical. I mean, because I'm not sure that all that we have done have necessarily been to the benefit of middle class or wealthy people. So we will get to that, and it will be done. Because
so
we need those
you
resources.
reject the view that because there are people who...
Absolutely. I just don't buy it. I know where I came from to where I am today. And it has to be through hard work. And I'm not going to not let people go off because they are wealthy. I mean, my influences can only be the Bible and God.
So when should we expect a working property tax regime?
Wow. You know, we had said that we're going to do an absolute tax overhaul this year. And then we got COVIDed, as you can see. Now we have launched the President's 100 billion Obaatanpa period. I need that money. Now, if there's any other motivation to get that 30 billion extra that I want from Ghana, that will be one of the reasons why it will get done in a hurry.
Fair enough. Let's talk about the 100 billion, this Obaatanpa thing. Where is that money going to come from?
But why do we say it's an Obaatanpa thing?
That's the name you call it, right?
Thin. The thin is what I'm...
It doesn't sound exciting enough?
It's not that exciting, but I think it's a very sober, serious proposition for the country's future. And that's why I don't want to call it a thing.
Okay. So this Obaatanpa program.
Yes. So we have indicated that we will have 30 billion from, and this is over a 3-year period. Is that correct? Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think most economies are looking anywhere from 6 to 7% of investments into their economies for a recovery. So 10 billion, so 3 years, so 30 billion each year. You know, that's, we have a 400 billion economy, so that puts us at around maybe 9% or 75% or so. And the question is, can you not do it? So if you have 10 billion from government revenues, and then we are looking at that 70 divided by 3, that's 23 or so and change, and that is a combination of what local private sector and FDI coming in. We have the Center for the African Free Trade Continental Area Agreement, and the issue for us is to become a real regional hub, in terms of logistics, ICT, financial services, and as you know, the Minister of Trade has already launched the automobile program that seems to be going on quite well. So if you ask me whether I can attract $25 billion a year of private capital into this economy, I believe we can do that.
So you're saying part of this is FDI, and then part of that will be, how much of that will be borrowed money though?
How much of that will be borrowed money? I think we are looking more at PPPs and FDIs directly into that. We certainly will have to then determine in each of these transactions whether government needs to do something with tax waivers, etc., to be able to do that. But it's not, this year, I guess within these 6 months, we were able to raise, sort of 20 billion, Ghana cedis or so. So it's not daunting, I think it's an issue of your own determination, that this is what you want to do. You have the people behind you to do that. People are trained and excited about the future. And we have to, Bernard, begin to move out of the simple issues of 1% budget deficit, and you spend 54 million on feeding people, and into a higher order of growth. And we need to imbue ourselves with that sense of possibility to go there.
The issue of capital for Ghana's development is a major issue.
Yes.
We don't generate enough financial capital. We do have the human capital. Yeah. We do have the social capital. We have the environmental capital. But it looks like the financial capital part is
missing.
Is the issue.
Interesting.
You're a Wall Street trained banker.
Yeah.
Beyond going to the Eurobond, and beyond what UOFI does with some of his people with FDI, what's your real solution to the lack of capital as a major problem for not just Ghana? It's an African challenge.
It is, but we lose a lot. We lose 70 billion in illicit financial flows, of which 55% of that is commercial. What these companies do to us when they come. Bernard, 1% movement in African trade with our global partners is $70 billion. Okay, so that will be new revenue. So those are the things. And then, as I mentioned to you, if we are able to reduce the cost of borrowing, that is also literally another 30 billion. So all of these are fundamental ways to be able to generate that capital. I think we have the first cut of the document for Ghana being a financial services center. Now that type of anthropo, moves money through your systems. So it is all of those things that we need to work through to generate that. Financial services, logistics, education, etc. We have the capacity. We would unlock the last.
There's a view that one of the reasons why local capital formation is weak is that our domestic private sector doesn't get opportunity.
Yes.
Because a lot of the private sector is foreign and it's cyclical. Yeah. Once they make their money, the dividends go back to where they went to. Yeah. So there has to be a deliberate push of domestic, local, private sector. Yeah. Do you agree, and what's your plan for that?
I totally agree, and I know we can do it. Government now in cabinet has agreed on a policy of local sourcing, as the first act before people look outside. But if you look at the Agenda 111, which is the 88, which has now become 111, what the President has said and Cabinet is agreeing is that all of the construction will be done by local contractors. Okay, so if this is a 1.8 billion or 1.5 billion program, that means we know. So I have to find a way of syndicating $800 million locally to ensure that the financing is local and therefore local contractors. And the reason why that's important is that it then segues us into what we intend to have a national housing boom. So you build up these contractors, they are strong, they build these first-class hospitals, and then move, and they are in all the districts, and then move into a national housing tree. So yes, those are some of the sort of real attempts to really roll back this.
Why I agree with that, exactly a year ago, around this period, former Nigerian Central Bank Governor Soludo was in town. And he makes the point that capital can be cultural or ethnic in the sense that ownership of capital is key to where it goes. Now, some say one inadvertent consequence of your financial sector reform is that particularly our banking sector is foreign dominated. And they don't see how that synchronizes with what you just told me.
Right. But it's, what are you saying? You're talking about numbers, or you're talking
in terms
about
of the
sheet?
size?
But what was it before? The fact that you have comatose banks owned by Ghanaians does not serve you any good, where people's monies were in jeopardy. But what we did in our intervention was not only to then increase the capital so that we had stronger banks, we also created GATT, which ensured, that some banks merged, and these were all local, and that they stayed in the. I mean, you can look at CBG now. CBG did not exist some time ago, and look at the level of work it's doing. So the thing has to be really looked at and say, is this true? Have we looked at the banks that are now here? And if you compare their balance sheet to what was before, is this the type of environment you want? I'm not even sure how many banks are owned by Singaporeans in Singapore. Okay? But the issue is whether they created an environment in which the banks were there and the resources were given to local entrepreneurs. And that's what we should build.
While I get that, the view is that you need a nice blend of both local private and local public. So yes, CBG, Ghana Commercial, ADB are good banks, but they are state-owned.
Yeah.
So Fidelity, Prudential, Cal is a mix. That's what we have left.
UMB,
UMB,
Omni-Basic.
Okay, it's also Omni-Basic is not Ghanaian. There's ownership is mixed, right?
Yeah. And then you had a bunch of weak non-operational banks.
Yeah, about 9 banks.
And that makes you happy because they can't perform, they give bad loans, and they put people's money in jeopardy. Come on. I mean, the current situation of our banking industry, is much stronger, and I think we're going to continue to strengthen that.
So are you confident that they will support the type of industrialization and the type of investments? For example, within the COVID period, we've seen how supply chains have been disrupted. We had to produce a lot of things here.
Right.
For the first time, Vietnam wasn't exporting rice, neither was Thailand.
Right.
Yet our banks don't give money to farmers in the quantities and with the rates that can help them really produce. So that's the question, right?
Yeah.
So how are you going to ensure that the money goes into areas that support what you actually want to do with the economy?
Well, that's a conundrum you have as to, in economies of this nature, how much is state intervention necessary to catapult, and how much do you also balance, private sector to be unleashed to do what it is. And I think it's a delicate balance that we are going. But we can't, support misbehavior, under the guise of Ghanaian ownership. That can happen. It does us no good. That can't be tolerated. Okay? And then what do? So you create a gut that then saves Ghanaian banks and makes them merge, and then you also have additional bank of the size of GCB, such that we can move ahead. But I think Bernard, when it's all said and done, when you look at what we intend to do these 6 months, I think maybe it captures a bit of the spirit of where we want to go. True, we ensured that there will be lifeline and there will be water going. But more significantly, to look at CST, for example, and say, look, this digital economy, we need to boost it. So let's reduce that so that the youth and the fintech industry can do what they have to do. Then we looked at labor and said, we need to keep people on the job. So what do? We gave some money to both faith-based organizations and the TUC of 100 million to look at retraining and skills. That's important for labor. We also then put together this 3-year, 2 billion guarantee fund, which would ensure that the rates are lower and all of these companies have access to additional. With the changes that the Bank of Ghana did earlier in March and April, we thought we were going to create a 3 billion syndicated facility. In the end, as we speak now, between restructuring and moratoria and new loans, 7.8 billion, has been put into the economy. So the guarantee fund 2 billion is going to help. Then we also added another 150 million to CAPBAS, saying that there are some real issues in the creative arts and media and Association of Independent Universities. And so that will shield. Okay. And then the vulnerability that we have seen of a no unemployment insurance scheme is also now being put in place. So you are trying to ensure not only stabilization, but an ability to get resources to look into the future And then you cap it for people to see where we are going, which is now the 100 billion Obaatanpa.
Permit me, sorry I keep going back to the financial sector, but you spent a lot of time on that, and the things you said suggest to me that you've heard some of the criticism, because you were quite, I can even say, annoyed in the way you wrote your response. So
that is a rare
attribute. Now 13 billion spent on banks, another 5 on the special savings and loans and the others, and then another 3 will be spent on the SEC group. So that's 21 billion. Some people say, in retrospect, that money could have not saved bad banks, but could have created more institutions than just the few that were left, in terms of, for example, consolidated. Because this is 21 billion cedis. Put that in context. You're asking for 11.6 billion for the rest of the year. So this is a lot of money. They are talking about jobs lost. Yes, you've saved deposit, you've given depositors their payments. People are debating whether the mode of payment is everything else. My point is, in retrospect, 21 billion to save the institutions that were saved. A lot of the microfinance, savings and loans disappeared. Some of the banks were coalesced into one. 21 billion, was that in retrospect the best approach to use?
I mean, Monday morning refereeing and quarterbacking is very easy until you have 4.6 million deposited on the streets, homeless and not able to move. I don't really have, and for people who had an asset quality review document on their desk for years and change, and chose not to do anything about it. And then you come back and quote the IMF on other issues. What was that doing on your desk, and why were you not courageous enough to take that decision? Bernard, 4.6 million people with their, I don't know whether you've seen pictures of the Great Depression in America. It's not an easy thing. And anybody in finance, being a student of history, knows what you have to do. Okay. So yes, what we know is that we have a stronger system than we had before, and they are responding to our economic needs.
Final point on that before we go on a quick break. Somebody sent me a message today that they invested 1 million cedis with a financial institution, and they were being asked to come for either 500,000 now, and that's the end of the matter, or agree for the 1 million to be spread in a 5-year bond with no interest. They feel they're being put between a rock and a hard place, and it's not fair. Yeah. What's your comment?
Well, my comeback to it is that there's going to be burden sharing in things that we all actively participated in. Some of these institutions were not supposed to guarantee returns. They did. We went to certain institutions whose returns were a little richer than they should be. But, we talk about 92 to 93% of people have received their money. Will there be collateral damage? Of course there will be. Will there be sacrifices? Of course there will be. If we have a war, maybe 40, 50,000 soldiers will be sent, and some households will lose their people. We don't come back. I mean, the community and society, in the end, must be made to stand strong and hold.
This is still the point of view. We're talking to Minister of Finance Ken Ofori-Atta. When we come back, we have some questions from some groups who want me to directly ask the Finance Minister. We'll be right back. Welcome back to the point of view. We're talking to Minister of Finance Ken Ofori-Atta, who presented the midterm budget, first of its kind in such a serious situation. He says it's unprecedented, and these are depressing level issues, but he's not going to let Ghanaians go down by dampening their spirit. He says we can do it, and he will sail through. The IPPs want me to ask you, when will they get their 1.4 billion, some of it paid? Because apparently part of the Eurobond you took, 1 billion was supposed to have gone to them. In a few days leading up to the budget, they were saying, they were hoping that you will make some provision to pay part, if not all of their 1.4 billion the debt that they are owed.
Yeah.
There was nothing on that in the budget.
Right. Actually, this morning I saw a letter from, is it Obaatanpa? I think he's
Yes.
chairman of
the IPP chamber.
IPP chamber. Yeah.
Your old business partner.
It is, isn't it? Yeah, he's a much bigger person than I am now. So I saw that. But yes, we did, and we have put $1 billion aside. But we have some serious issues with regards to these negotiations with them. And that has been, very public. I mean, we've been having these discussions, and maybe COVID has not helped with regards to facilitating that. But true, the money is there. We kept it aside. We didn't, embellish it or anything. But we need to be clear on these many issues.
So the money hasn't been spent elsewhere. It's still there.
No.
The $1 billion.
$1 billion
is there for them.
That's why the central banks reserves continue to be that good. It's there for them. So I wouldn't worry about that.
Road contractors wanting to ask you, they were promised payments. They are in 3 groups. First group, up to 500K have been paid. Second group, 40% paid. The third group, who are 10 million and upwards, they are the guys who do the pothole patching and critical routine maintenance. They said they haven't received anything since the last time you
I think that was the middle group.
The middle group, yes.
Yeah, the middle group is what you're talking about.
Yes, they said they haven't received anything.
In which I think my deputy released the money maybe 2-3 weeks ago.
Okay.
And maybe 90 million was paid and another bit is being paid. So they're taken care of.
For the middle group?
Yeah, for the middle group specifically.
What about the top group?
Every group had been paid
except the middle group.
What we promised, except the middle group, and that's what they're talking about. And that Honorable Charles, solved that problem about 2.5 weeks ago.
Final question. Convince us that the plan you've put in place is going to work, because we are going to face a 2 to 3 year recession globally. And a lot of people feel that means that your expenditure must go into growth-sparing things, not consumables.
That's
necessarily.
correct. That's correct.
How sure are you that it's going to work?
I think with the same confidence that the president emitted that he would turn this country around when we came during the elections in 2016 and where we are today. And when I see the spirit of Ghanaians and the capacity, I have no question in my mind that we are a people meant to do great things, and government should lead that effort and encourage people to do. My wife is a clinical psychologist. The spirit of the people is so fundamental and important to this. The skill set of the people is crucial to that. And I think we have built up. But the sense of social mobility, that this country is also mine, is also a spirit of confidence that the president is building. And with that, I'm not sure there is any limit to where we can go to.
I'm sure we'll get a chance to interrogate that later. Thank you for talking to us, Honorable Minister of Finance Ken Ofori-Atta. Good luck to you. And that's all we have time for today's edition of The Point of View. We've been speaking to Minister of Finance Ken Ofori-Atta on the midterm budget he presented and plans to stabilize and revitalize. We hope you've enjoyed it. We'll see you next time. Bye-bye.